Okay, let's take a look at lesson 59. We'll take it apart. Let's just look at the bass line for now. Okay, so if you look at the time signature, it's in 2/4. That tells us that we've got 2 quarter notes every beat. So it's 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and so on. Okay, and we follow the fingerings. Okay, those numbers again are the left hand. So 1 is telling you to use this finger, 2 is use that finger, 3. So you want to use those fingers. Okay, those numbers are not the frets. Okay, don't get those confused. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look. First measure, you have a C. Next note is an E. Then the next note is a D. And then G. Measure 3, 2 on the B right there, second finger, and then D, 4th string open, and then next measure C, and then the next note is a G. Measure 5, A, 5th string open, E, next measure D, then A, and then next measure G, then B, and then C, and then C again. And those are the notes. Let's go ahead and run through it. 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay. Lesson 59, we did the bass. Now let's take a look at the 16th notes. The I, M, A, the fingerings, okay, on the top voice. If you notice, it's a combination of the top voice and the bass notes. What I mean by that is if you look on like the very first note, you have the C in the bass. It's also connected to the 16th notes on the top voice. Okay. The same thing with that next note on the bass is an E. That E is connected to the top voice as well. Okay. So that could be seen as part of the arpeggios on the top voice. But when you see it on the bass, they're quarter notes. So you want to, basically what you want to do is you want to let that bass note ring while you play the 16th notes. Okay, so taking a look at that first measure, you have a C in the bass, then you have an open E, and then you have a C on the second string, and then a G on the third string. Okay, so while you play, those are the 4 notes, right? That C is going to ring. Do you hear that? Instead of, if you were just to play it as a 16th, that's what it would be. So you want to let that bass note, hold on to that bass note while you play those other notes. Okay, so that's the first 4 16th notes. Take a look at the next note is an E, and it's the same notes, E, C, and G. Do you see that? So we have C, then E. If you notice that arpeggio, the I, M, A fingers for the first measure are playing the same thing. Okay. So first measure. Okay, next measure. Okay. have the 16ths, and then you have the 8ths. Okay, so when you see the first measure, it should be bum 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 bum. That's the rhythm. Next measure. Back to the second measure. You want to make sure that that bass note is ringing. It's the open D, and then it goes to a G. And when you play the G, you want to make sure you're holding on to that note while you play the next chord, which is the F, and then the second string, and then the third string open. Okay, so second measure is next measure. Okay, if you noticed that arpeggio was F, B, G, and then again F, B, G. Okay, the bass note is B, and then D. Do you see that? Okay, that was measure 3, and then measure 4. If you notice, on measure 4, it still does arpeggio. And then the second half of that measure, instead of arpeggiating it, it plays them all together as a chord, the same notes. Okay. So let's try it from the beginning. Measure 5, you have an accidental. There's a C sharp. Measure 5, it plays the A, E, C sharp, and then G. And then it plays an E. That arpeggio is the same notes, E, C sharp, and G. So measure 5 is this. Okay. Measure 6, F, D, and then A. F, first string, D, second string, A, third string. That same idea that they do in 4, measure 4. You arpeggiate, right? And then you change the bass note, but the chord is the same chords that you just arpeggiated. The same, not chords, the same notes. Just this time you play them together. That's measure 6. Measure 7. Right, you have a G, E, C, and then a G on the third string. Oops. That's probably going to be the trickiest part of the whole lesson. Okay, that measure right there, measure 7, because these fingerings are very awkward. Okay, and the fingers are weak. So you're having to go from here right. That part's easy. It's the next part that's a little tricky. Right there. B on the 5th string, F on the 4th string, D on the 2nd string. Okay, but you have that 3rd string. That 3rd string is open. It's a G. Okay, so you just want to make sure you're holding down those notes, holding them down, so that you don't hear any buzzes. Next measure, last measure. Okay, so you just got to be careful with the 16th and the eighth notes. Okay, from measure 5. Okay, if you notice from measure 5 to the end of 6, you had 16th notes, and then the last two parts is where you have the 8th notes. Okay, so it's next part. Okay, on the very ending of the last measure, you have a C, and then you have the chord, right? And then you end with the C. And if you notice on top of that C, there's a rest. So you just got to make sure you stop the chord as soon as you play the C, that these fingers come in and stop that chord that you had just played. Watch. See that? Like that. Okay. So the top voice, I know we usually separate the bass, the IMA fingers, and then you put those parts together. You still put it together with the bass. This other part, I would say you could get it done in 2 parts. Okay, we had been doing 3 parts before, but because the parts are the way they are, it could be done in 2. And if you're learning your chords, the whole first measure is a C chord, right? Second measure is a G7, still G7, back to C on measure 4, measure 5, A7, measure 6, D minor, back to C, G7, C. Okay, now there's some inversions, because if you look, the bass, it sometimes goes to the bass note. So, but those are the main chords. Okay.